Hello, this is Professor Keith Ross from the John Jay College of Criminal Justice. This is another lecture in my series of lectures for my college class. This is for my police studies class. This is going to be Chapter 5, Becoming a Police Officer. A lot of this lecture is going to be informational. However, there are some testable points, and I will point them out to each and every one of you. Um, Most law enforcement positions are considered to be civil service. That is a system in which employees or soon to be employees are hired, retained in advance, disciplined, and discharged, meaning fired, based on merit or their abilities and their qualifications. Police in today's day and age, it is not based on a patronage system or political favor. In order to become a police officer, it's what you know and how you can apply that. It's not why, it's not who you know. So when we're talking about civil service, at least in theory, it's supposed to be center and flat across the board, that everyone has the opportunity to get this position. Therefore, active recruitment takes place to obtain and retain qualified candidates. For some of you that have been at the college before, prior to COVID, you would have noticed that the Police Cadet Corps and NYPD Recruitment were there constantly, state troopers, and actually other jurisdictions. I know the Dallas Police, I think the San Antonio Airport Police had spoken to one of my classes. So there is active recruitment going on. For this chapter, although the book speaks in general terms, I'm probably going to focus more on the police department that's known to most of you, which is going to be the NYPD and what their recruitments and requirements are to get on the job. One of the things that I think is really important to think about is that police are both a reflection of society and active participants in societal concerns. What this means, at least to me, is that our police, especially in our major urban centers, reflect our population. So if we are talking about populations where it's maybe 40% people of color, defining people of color, I guess, as African Americans, Latinx, Asian, Southeast Asian, things of that nature. We want our police force to reflect this diversity. However, one of the things that I was always big on when I would teach police recruits is that not only do they reflect society, but they are direct participants in society. And I make the argument this way, that if you become a police officer in whatever community it is, and to me, regardless, let's say we're talking about a Caucasian, a white police officer working in a primarily African American community. Just because there is this sort of racial difference does not mean that they are not part of that community. Follow the logic to this. Most police officers are going to work anywhere, minimum 40 hours a week, probably with overtime. They're going to get about 60, maybe 70 hours a week. How about we use 50 to 60? I think that's a better number. So already you're spending about 1/3 of your waking moments in this other community, in this community that you quote unquote police. Now, unless you're the kind of person that brown bags lunch, you're probably going to be buying food in the community that you work in. If you get sort of like a little bit sick, you have a minor cold or whatever, what do? Well, you're probably going to stop at the local drugstore at work and pick up whatever medicine that it is, Sudafed, Dayquil, whatever. With buying meals, buying medicine, buying other things in that community, you're contributing to the economy of that community. Now, if you are contributing to that economy in that community, and you're spending at least 1/3 of your waking moments in that community, does that not make you a participant in that community? And if you are a participant in that community, you should have a vested interest in that community flourishing. As our nation, state, city become more culturally diverse, our police departments reflect this. And again, the major police departments, when I'm talking major police departments, Los Angeles, New York, Boston, Chicago, Houston, Dallas, other big urban cities, urban metropolis, they make a concerted effort to maintain levels of people of color, women. We're starting to now see gender fluidity coming into the police departments. There are police officers that identify themselves as trans, things of that nature. So now let's talk about the NYPD. I'm reading the mission statement that comes straight from the NYPD webpage. The mission of the New York City Police Department is to enhance the quality of life for all citizens, for all residents in New York City by working in partnership with the community. This is something that hails back to Robert Peel's 9 principles of policing. To enforce the law, preserve the peace, reduce fear, and maintain order, maintaining the public order. The department is committed to accomplishing its mission to protect the lives and property of all citizens of New York City by treating every citizen with courtesy, professionalism, and respect. For most of you, if you look at any marked police car, any marked RMP, Radio Motor Patrol, you will see CPR on that because that's one of the core values. And to enforce the laws impartially, and we've talked about that before, enforcing laws impartially, fighting crime both through deterrence and the relentless pursuit of criminals. Again, hailing back to Peel's 9 principles of policing, not only addressing crime, but trying to prevent it before it happens. The values of the NYPD in partnership with the community, we as the NYPD pledge to protect the lives and property of our fellow citizens and impartially enforce the law. Fight crime both by preventing it and aggressively pursuing violators of the law. This next one I bolded out because I do think it's important. Maintaining a higher standard of integrity that is generally expected of others, because so much is expected of us. Well, what is integrity? Well, I think a really easy definition for integrity is doing the right thing when no one else is watching. And conversely, and we're going to talk about this in a later chapter, corruption is doing the wrong thing when nobody is watching. Value human life, respect the dignity of each individual, and render our services with courtesy and civility. Certain ways that the NYPD recruits people to join the NYPD. There's a website, www.nypdrecruit.com. You could call 212-RECRUIT. There are recruitment centers that will pop up in various colleges, various high schools, various other places, although not so much right now. But hopefully when life does resume, this will probably resume. And also for interest for at least a lot of college students, the NYPD Cadet Corps, where you become a cadet, you're doing administrative functions, you're getting paid, and you're also offsetting your tuition. If you're interested in about the Cadet Corps, feel free to Google it. What does it take to be an NYPD police officer? Well, the first thing that you need to do is take the police exam when it is offered. And it is not offered by the NYPD, it is offered by DCAS, which is another city agency, the Department of Citywide Administrative Services. Requirements to take the written examination: you must be 17 and a half years of age when taking the exam. You can't get on at 17 and a half, but you can take the test and then defer. Applicants must not have reached their 35th birthday on the day of the exam. Those applicants who are 35 and over and have active United States military service may deduct up to 6 years from the age of requirement. So although it doesn't happen all that often, I have had recruit students that were in their 40s. Here are the requirements. Candidates must be at least 21 years of age on or before the day of hire. So you have to be 21 at least to get on the job. And there is a concerted push by academicians and critics of the police department that maybe this age should be raised. I've heard the number 25 brought around, which sort of makes sense since we start talking about adolescent development, and usually that takes about 25 to end, where you're fully in your quote unquote adult mindset. Candidates must be a United States citizen on or before the day of hire. On or before the day of hire, candidates must have successfully completed either 60 college credits with a minimum grade point average of 2.0 from an accredited college or university. So that could be a community college, that could be a four-year institution like the ones you guys are attending. 2 years of full-time active military service in the United States Armed Forces with an honorable discharge, and have at minimum a high school diploma or its equivalent, a GED. Candidates must reside either within one of the 5 boroughs, so that's New York City, Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens, Staten Island, or the Bronx, or one of the surrounding counties of New York City. Suffolk County, Westchester County, Orange County, Rockland County, Nassau County, or Putnam counties on the day of hire. Now, there are some criticisms about this, that if you're going to represent the interests of New York City, you should live in New York City. Now, there are arguments for that. There are also arguments against that. Some of the arguments that are against that is that although you are a New York City police officer, your police officers extend throughout New York State. The other thing of interest is that if you lessen the geographical area of your pool to pick applicants, that's exactly it. You're lessening the pool. So if you expand to some of these outer counties, you might be able to get a more diverse and a more comprehensive and competent applicant pool. Candidates must possess a valid, unrestricted New York State driver's license on the day of hire. And there are many recruits, especially New York City residents, because in New York City, having a car is not really a requirement, since in New York City, we have 1/3 of the United States public transportation. So we do get recruits that come on the job that have gotten their driver's license maybe 3 months prior to getting on the job. And it shows when we do driver's training that, they're not really all that comfortable behind the wheel. Candidates must pay a $75 fee for fingerprinting as part of the investigation process. The reason why you pay $75 to be fingerprinted is not to get onto the NYPD, but in one of the provisions of employment is that you have a firearm. In order to have a firearm in New York City and New York State, you must have a license to have that firearm. So that's what the $75 goes for. Candidates must pass a drug alcohol screening test. This is either usually a urine test and or a hair sample test. Candidates must also pass a character and background investigation check by what used to be called the Applicant Processing Division, is now called the Candidate Assessment Division. The following factors are some of those which would be a cause for disqualification, meaning that you will not get on the job. Any conviction of an offense which is punishable by 1 or more years imprisonment. So if you have been convicted of any felony, you're not getting on the job. Any repeated convictions of an offense which indicates a disrespect for the law, a lack of good moral character or disposition towards violence and or disorder. So If you have been convicted of hopping the turnstile a few times, if you've been convicted of assaults, things of that nature, you're not going to get on the job. Discharges from employment where such discharge indicates poor behavior and or inability adjusting to discipline. What we're talking about here is if you have major problems with coworkers, with supervisory personnel, this is probably not going to be the job for you, because one of the things about the NYPD and most police departments is that they are organized as paramilitary organizations, meaning unless the order is not lawful and you can show that the order is not lawful, the order must be complied with. A dishonorable discharge from the armed forces, persons convicted of a petty larceny. We've semi-talked about this. How do we define what a larceny is? The legal definition of a larceny is the removal of property without permission or authority to do so. Petty larcenies are misdemeanors. So stealing, shoplifting, things of that nature are petty larcenies. They're not considered grand larcenies. But if you've been convicted of a petty larceny, well, that sort of speaks to your moral character. That not that you steal things, and it's not like we wouldn't think that, if you arrest a drug dealer and that drug dealer has $3,000 on him and you're the only one that knows about it, maybe you show integrity, maybe you don't. So maybe instead of invoicing all $3,000, you invoice $2,000 and bring the $1,000 home. Persons convicted of any domestic violence offense, the reason being that in the 90s there was a law put on the books that if you are convicted of any domestic violence, misdemeanor and or felony, you cannot possess a firearm in any one of the 50 states. One of the provisions of your employment is being able to have a firearm, and if you are being disqualified to get a firearms license, you will be disqualified from getting the job. Candidates must pass all medical, physical, written, psychological, and oral psychological. So you're going to take a medical test. So if you have high blood pressure, if you have diabetes, anemia, things like that, you must report that, and you must show that it won't debilitate you from working. If you've ever had a broken bone in your body, you have to obtain those medical records to show that it will not debilitate your position in the NYPD. You're going to have to take physical exams, so they're going to weigh you. You'll take one of the physical exams you're going to be taking is called the JST, and then there's also the run that you have to pass. You're also going to take, I forget how many questions, I think it was like 500 to 600 questions. You're going to take a written psychological exam. If you pass the written psychological exam, then you move on and have to speak to one of the NYPD's psychologists that they hire, and you're going to have anywhere from a 1 to a 3-hour session with them, and they're going to be discussing various things. Steps to becoming a police officer. So you sign up with DCAS. If there is a fee, you pay the fee and you take the written exam. The written exam consists of following elements: memorization, looking at a crime scene for maybe about a minute, that scene gets taken off, and then you have to remember salient details about that crime scene. Spatial recognition, can you recognize what 12 feet looks like and sort of approximate that? Written comprehension, written expression. One of the things about being a police officer is that you have to deal with people. So you're getting information from people, and you're going to have to record that on some type of official report. The NYPD wants you to be able to write a logical, sequential, cogent report that other people can read, because this report not only is going to the NYPD, but if someone gets arrested and this goes to trial, well, this becomes part of the evidence that will be brought into trial. It's called Rosario material. Information ordering. Can you get details down in a logical, sequential order? Reasoning, inductive and deductive reasoning, problem sensitivity, number facility. Pass the exam and get placed on a civil service list in score order, established by the Department of Citywide Administrative Services. Steps to becoming a police officer. Once a valid list has been established by DCAS, a list of eligible candidates is provided to the NYPD. Once this list has been provided to the NYPD, this is when all of that other stuff starts: the physical, the medical, the psychological. The applicant processing division, now called the candidate assessment division, begins this selection process. In the last 5 years, and when I prepared this PowerPoint, we were in like 2012, 2013, but I think the numbers are probably, at least the proportions are probably similar. So in the last 5 years, so let's think 2007, 2008 to about 2012, 2013, out of a pool of about 205,000 candidates, 15,600 have been hired. So we're talking like about 10%. So 1 out of 9 people that have taken the test and have passed the test will actually go to completion and get hired and swear in as an NYPD recruit. The medical exam, pre-screening, height, weight, BMI, which is body mass index, finding out how much fat is on the body. Medical issues, like I've said before, proof. You will need to get proof of documentation of 60 college credits or 2 years of military service. For those of you that are college students, it is a official transcript, not an unofficial transcript. Initial character assessment, you will be assigned an investigator. That investigator will be investigating everything about your background. They're going to want you to get your social security information, any on the books job that you have ever had that you have paid taxes on. You're going to have to talk about if there are spaces in between employment. What were you doing to get money? And sometimes those are easily answered out, sometimes they're not. If you were hired, if you were laid off, you're going to have to give a reason for that. If you've ever received a summons, you're going to have to explain what the summons was for, why did it happen, and did you pay it, or did you go to traffic court, did you go to criminal court, things of that nature. And again, you will be fingerprinted. And the fingerprinting is to obtain the firearms license. The JST, the Job Standard Test, I'm really not going to go over this, although on the PowerPoint that I will upload, there is a YouTube link that actually shows you the JST and how it works. So there's a barrier surmount, stair climb, physical restraint simulation, pursuit run, victim rescue, and then the trigger pull. You have to complete all of this consecutively within 4 minutes and 28 seconds or less. And what it's showing is that, 1, that you're physically fit, and 2, that you can handle the pressure that the NYPD, that the job will have. Psychological examinations, there's that written examination that you will take. If you can successfully pass the written psychological examination, then you will move on to an intensive oral examination conducted by a department psychologist. The NYPD does not require a polygraph examination. Pre-hire interview, you do the medical exam, you get drug tested, hair and urine. Character investigation update, bring in these forms to your investigator. This is on top of the 26-page booklet that you're going to have to fill out for your applicant investigator. You're going to have to bring all of your medical records, immunization records, if you've ever had a broken bone, and if you've ever been hospitalized, surgery, anything like that. You must obtain those records. For men, you have to show proof that you registered for the Selective Service, Social Security, driver's license, your W-2 and/or your tax records, all employment records, birth certificate, diplomas and transcripts. That's going to be a high school diploma, and if you are in college, either your college diploma and on top of the college diploma, you're going to have to provide an official sealed transcript, not the unofficial ones that you can easily obtain. If you were married, you have to show your marriage license. If you are a registered domestic partner, you have to show that. If you were divorced and or legally separated, you have to show paperwork showing that. Any other licenses, financial documents, do you have liens or debts? Do you pay a mortgage, credit card debt? If you were ever unemployed and you received unemployment, you have to show proof of that. court dispositions, proof of citizenship, memberships. Were you a member of a union, plumbers union, electricians union, fraternal orders, any sort of other social memberships, maybe Masonic lodges, things of that nature. Other forms as requested, and then that APD 5 booklet. There are three different types of police academies. Is the plebe system, which is a boot camp style. For any of my military men and women, you understand what boot camp is. For those of you that don't, there are plenty of online YouTube videos showing what boot camp sort of looks like. Second type of police academy, and this to me is testable. These three types of academies: technical training, where not really so concerned with discipline, but more concerned with the rules and regulations, not concerned with the sociological aspects of policing. And most major urban centers subscribe to this system, the college system that stresses the professional aspects of policing, balances problem solving, because that's what police do. Police, anytime a police officer gets a 911 call, that's usually a person in crisis. That person in crisis calls the police because they have a problem that the person doesn't think that they can readily handle themselves. So they're asking for assistance in handling that issue. Could be just as easy as a verbal dispute with someone. It could be something more complicated. But what's going to happen is if you call the police for some sort of problem, the expectation is that the police will be able to handle and solve that problem for you, at least in a temporary sense. Balances problem solving, cultural sensitivities, especially in the major urban centers. We're not talking about one culture. Honestly, in New York City, the most culturally diverse place on the planet is Queens, New York. Queens, New York has a registered 135 different languages that are spoken in Queens, New York. That's a lot of different cultural sensitivities for a police officer to be able to sort of intuit and understand. And stress management. This is a stressful job, and it's not for everybody, but there are ways to positively handle that stress. And when I say positively handle that stress, that doesn't mean drinking, that doesn't mean using narcotics or prescription medication. There are other ways, maybe working out, maybe meditation, maybe yoga, controlled breathing exercises at the very least, with elements of the technical training model. This type of academy is gaining popularity. Both NYPD and LAPD utilize this type of academy. But also, I just want you to realize, even though we're calling this the college system, it's not fully set up like a college like in some of the Scandinavian countries of Europe, because there is sort of this boot camp discipline thing that goes on, at least in the NYPD, that once a recruit shows up and is ready to begin his or her tour, what they have to do is that they have to stand muster. And for those of you that are military people, you understand what standing muster is. That's basically standing at attention, equally spaced from one another and following orders. Picking up your recruit bag, putting it down, doing left face, doing right face, being visually inspected by your OCI, your official company instructor, making sure that you shave, that your clothes are clean and pressed, things of that nature. After successful completion of this background investigation process, an eligible is sworn in, meaning that they will, if they have successfully passed all of the requirements, passed the background check, they will get hired provisionally by the NYPD, and then they will have to show up at the police academy, whatever date that is. An eligible is sworn in, and they have to swear an oath. This is one of the very few jobs where you have to swear an oath. Not many accountants don't swear an oath. Electricians and plumbers don't swear an oath. Retail workers don't swear an oath. Chefs don't swear an oath. So there's something important about this job, that you're swearing an oath, that you're going to uphold the statutes of New York State, that you're going to uphold the state constitution, the United States Constitution, that you're going to treat people fairly and impartially. This PPO status, takes an oath and becomes what's called a PPO, or a probationary police officer. In the academy, they will be referred to on paper as PPO, but sort of colloquially, they will be referred to as recruits or recruit officers. This PPO status will take anywhere from 6 to 9 months, meaning that you will be in a police academy 6 to 9 months. Usually the standard, at least in the NYPD, is 6 months. The academy process. Academy curriculum, you're going to learn the procedures, the rules and regulations of the NYPD, as illustrated in the NYPD's Patrol Guide, which is about a 2,400-page book. And, it's very difficult to actually memorize that. You would have to read it like 2 or 3 times from front to back to really sort of intuit that. And it spells out what the rules and regulations for police officers are, and for supervisors, if there's a patrol supervisor, if there's a desk sergeant, if a lieutenant has to show up on the scene, if someone higher, let's say a duty captain, a duty chief. It spells out what each of their functions are at a certain incident. The penal law, the New York State penal law. Human relations, cultural sensitivity, stress management, leadership training, paramilitaristic discipline. You'll also receive training in firearms, because one of the things that you have to show is that you're proficient to some level utilizing a firearm. Driver's training, you're going to have to show proficiency in emergency handling of a vehicle, in this case, a police vehicle. It's one thing to get a driver's license, it's another thing to pass what's called the EVOC course. Physical conditioning and training, tactical training, learning how to assess your surroundings, situational awareness, things like that. And depending on the zeitgeist, like right now, if there was an academy class, there is always a field training component, and that field training component can be anywhere from two weeks to about a month. After what do you get? Well, after about 5.5 years, approximately, you're making a salary of about $90,000, not really including holiday pay, not including overtime, differentials, things of that nature. Some things that you get. During your first and second year hired as a police officer, you get 10 paid vacation days. That amounts to 2 weeks vacation. During your third, fourth, and fifth year, 13 paid vacation days. After 5 years of service, 27 paid vacation days. Now, if you think about 27 vacation days, that's 5 weeks vacation plus 2 days. Unlimited sick leave with full pay. Now, people talk about that. The way the NYPD works, it doesn't work on sick days. It works on sick incidents. So if you have, let's say you caught the flu and you call in sick and it takes you 7 days to recover, well, it takes you 7 days to recover. That counts as one sick incident. The other side of that coin is that if you call in sick and a department surgeon or a department doctor requests to see you to physically assess you, you must go. You must go. This is not, I'm not really feeling up to it. Worst comes to worst, if you were to tell this doctor that you're so sick that you can't drive, they can send a police officer to come get you and bring you to that medical district. A choice of paid medical programs. So you receive medical insurance, you get prescription plans, dental plans, and eyeglass or eyewear plans. An annuity fund, deferred compensation, 401k plans, which are retirement plans, on top of the pension. Optional retirement at 1/2 salary after 22 years of service. If you complete 25 years, I believe it is a little more, and cost of living increases also get factored into that. On top of that, there is the annual banking of $12,000 per year of variable supplement. which goes into your pension that you can get after 22 years of service, if not retiring. There are promotional opportunities. You can go from police officer to sergeant. You can go from sergeant to lieutenant. You can go from lieutenant to captain, all by taking civil service examinations that are given out by DCAS. Educational opportunities, training. There are in the NYPD, you are allowed to take 4 free classes at John Jay, whether it is undergraduate or graduate. Additional benefits are available to military personnel. I'm not going to talk about the contract stuff right now. The NYPD is out of contract and has been out of contract, I think, for about 2.5, 3 years. Newly hired NYPD officers can expect to receive nearly $2.2 million in pension, drawn out over about 32 years. So if you can successfully get on the job, pat yourself on the back because you've become a millionaire. You just have to be able to retire. You have to get to the end of the rainbow to collect your little pot of gold. The academy process, the field training officer approach, a veteran police officer, assists in the shaping of probationary police officers by teaching agency policies, police officer tasks, and observing the PPO, the probationary police officer, utilizing their academy training in field settings. So all the stuff that you've learned in the academy, what the different laws are, what the rules and regulations are, learning how to deal with people. Well, now you have to take all of this information, this data that's been put into you, and show a practical approach to utilizing it. I'm going to skip to Benjamin Bloom's taxonomy of learning approach. This is a testable concept. The police training officer approach utilizes Benjamin Bloom's taxonomy of learning. The taxonomy of learning is a system detailing learning behaviors of students absorbing cognitive informational skills. So we're talking about data, things that are reasonable, things that are logic. So at the bottom of this is knowledge, learning the information, taking this data in. So have my base of knowledge. Well, now what do I have to do? Well, I have to comprehend that knowledge. I have to absorb that knowledge. And what does this like field training officer program do? Well, now it shows that I have the knowledge, I've absorbed or comprehended it, and now what we want to see is me applying this information in real world contexts. The first 3 elements, these first 3, knowledge, comprehension, and application, are intrinsic for basic learning. The last 3 elements, which I didn't really go into, which is analysis, synthesis, and evaluation, are intrinsic for higher learning. This is for people, men and women like all of you. I'm going to skip to diversity and discrimination. What are police? Again, I've said this. Police are both a reflection. You know what? I don't want to do this. What I want to do is the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which are considered to be Title VII laws. This statute provides for fair employment practices. Section 703A of this act makes it unlawful for an employer to fail to hire, refuse to hire, discharge, fire, or otherwise discriminate against an individual with respect to employment compensation, terms, conditions, or privilege because of race, color, religion, sex, age, pregnancy, or national origin, among other factors. And this was further fully developed in 1972 with the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, a federal agency with the authority to intervene and enforce these statutes that were put into play in 1964. Also defined what sexual harassment is, which is a form of sex discrimination. EEO and implications of law enforcement. A more diversified police force seeks to reflect society, more women, more minorities. Affirmative action, preferential treatment to groups previously not represented. Reverse discrimination, talking about racial quotas. Well, now what happens if you have a population of, let's say, 30% African Americans? We're saying that we want our police departments to reflect that. But what happens if we're only getting 20% of of this, let's say, young pool of African Americans that are at least 17 and a half up until 35 applying for the job? Well, we're not really reflecting society because we want to get it closer to that 30% number. Well, it's an issue to deal with. Double marginality, the impression of being biased against one's own race to gain respect of the majority racial counterparts. You can read a little bit more about that. I don't really want to go into that. Disability and law enforcement, 1990 Americans with Disability Acts. This is not to hire disabled individuals, but to prohibit discrimination against applicants that can perform the essential functions of the job. If someone is HIV positive, can they perform the functions in the police department, whether uniform or civilian? Question to ask. Diabetes, dyslexia, line of duty injuries, things of that nature. Last part, questions to ask before endeavoring to pursue a career in law enforcement. Can you handle boredom? Working on a foot post for 8 hours, it's not always not always exciting. Definitely not always as exciting as we might see on TV. Can you handle moments of extreme stimulation coupled with that boredom? So you're on the foot post for 4.5 hours. You're starting to get tired, and all of a sudden, the world just blows up. Someone gets robbed and shot right in front of you. Well, now your adrenaline has to kick in, and from this sort of resting state, now you're at 102 already. Can you handle long hours at work away from your family? Can you handle working weekends, holidays, and differing shifts? Again, a paramilitary organization. The needs of the department are paramount. So just because you want to stay home on Christmas, especially if you're lower on the totem pole of seniority, if enough people have taken off, there are minimum manning requirements that must be maintained. I guess you're going to work on Christmas, on Thanksgiving, things of that nature. Can you deal with people who do not like you? Can you follow rules to the letter and adhere to a well defined chain of command? You ask for a day off, you bring it to your immediate supervisor, your sergeant. The sergeant says, no, you can't have that day off. Well, you can't do what's called boss shopping. Well, maybe go to the lieutenant that you're friendly with so he or she grants you that day off. Well, it's not going to fly. Sexual harassment, quid pro quo. You do something for me, I will do something for you. These sexual harassment scenarios contribute to what's considered to be hostile work environments, stressful work environments, and especially in law enforcement. This is a policing class, but I'm also talking about corrections, court officers, things like that. The job is already stressful enough. To have to deal with these other external factors just makes it even more stressful. Residency requirements, I've already talked about that. If you want, there is no homework, but the very last slide will bring you to the candidate assessment page and will show you that 25-page booklet that must be filled out completely in black or blue ink on top of all the other paperwork that you have to provide. Well, that's going to be it for me. Have a great day, and I will talk to you all soon. Bye.